Hey guys, welcome back to my redstone testing world for episode 2 in my survival redstone series. Today we're going to be doing a follow-up episode from last week's episode where we looked at a multi-story elevator. I mentioned last week that you could do a keycard design instead of the dial that I showcased, and that's what we're going to be looking at this week. So I've showcased this here, built up for an elevator, but you don't need to do it for an elevator, you can do it for whatever you want a keycard reader for. We're going to be following much the same format as last episode, where we're going to do a quick demonstration of how this works, and then we're going to take a look at the redstone, and then we're going to do a tutorial so you guys can build it up in your own survival worlds. Over here we have a bunch of keycards for each floor. We can grab one and chuck it into this hopper here, and that's going to read our keycard and take us to the appropriate floor. In this case, floor 1. Then we can come back down and we can grab another keycard, chuck that into the hopper, and this time it'll take us to floor 2. Not built up any more floors than that, but you guys get the point. This system actually has two modes, one where the floor will reset an interval after we take the keycard out of this barrel here, and another one where it will reset after a short period of time after the keycard has been read. We can toggle between these two modes using this switch here. So that's now switched into the second mode. So if we throw in the keycard, then we wait for a brief period of time, we can leave the keycard in the barrel and the system's still going to reset itself, as you see there. So let's have a quick look at the redstone. I've color coordinated again, same as last week. It's pretty straightforward. It looks quite complicated, but a lot of it is just a repeating pattern that's tileable like this. Over here we've got an item filter. This essentially reads our keycards. If you don't know how to rename the keycards, all you do is take any item and you rename it in an anvil, and then you want to put 41 of these in here with some kind of renamed filler item. Once the keycard has made its way into the appropriate item filter, we'll be able to read that through a signal here, and this will trigger the floor selector, which will spit out one of these redstone blocks here, and that will feed up into our signal tower, which will select the floor, the same as in last week's episode. There's a few more components that make this work, but I'll try and explain them as we go through the tutorial this time. So as you can see, I've done the tutorial slightly different this time. We've got it in various different stages, and this is to keep the video length manageable, because doing a block by block tutorial would take absolutely ages, and like 90% of it would be in time-lapse form. So the way I've set this up is we've got buttons here which take us through the various stages, and each stage that we're at, the bit that we're meant to be looking at, is colored in a given color. So let's go back to the beginning here. These are the dimensions that you need to excavate to fit the build into. I'd recommend doing this before you start working on the build so that you know where everything should go and so that you have enough space to do all of the work. So you can do these stages in whatever order you like. This is just how I've chosen to do it for the tutorial, and it's probably the easiest way to follow if you're going to build this up in your own survival world. So this is the first part of the item filter that you're going to want to build up. Just got a comparator here and a repeater facing into this block here and a redstone torch underneath here. What this does is it just locks the hopper that we're going to place here until it has an item that comes into it that matches the filter item, and then it's going to unlock the hopper and allow that item to filter through. Once you've done that, you want to go and place the hoppers in this arrangement here. I've got arrows on them so you can see which direction they should be facing. Essentially the top row of hoppers should be facing in this direction here. Same with the bottom row. And then you want one line of hoppers that goes all the way along to the left hand side here. So the next part of the system that we're going to want to build up is this item stream here. The way this works is that the item will be thrown into this hopper, which will feed it into the dispenser. In a second, we're going to build up some redstone circuitry that's then going to activate the dispenser when it detects that it has an item in it, which will then shoot the item into this honey block. If you guys didn't know, honey blocks are actually slightly less than 1 block wide, and as such, the item will be aligned perfectly so that it'll both slide on the ice and be picked up by any hopper that is available. So it's essentially going to sit right on this gap here. At some point, you're going to have to put a water source block at the end here, which is going to push the items along so that if they're not picked up by the first hopper, they'll be moved along to the next hoppers and eventually picked up. I like to do this at the very end of the build so that if I accidentally break anything, like these ice blocks here, I'm not going to wreck all of my redstone that I've built up. This here in blue is the first part of our floor selector. What this does is when we have an item that comes through this item filter, this redstone torch is going to flash for a second, and that's going to allow this piston to retract, and then when it switches back on again, it's going to send a redstone pulse in here, and the piston will push the block up, but before it does that, it's going to send a 1-tick pulse through this repeater here. The reason we're doing that is to extend this piston here with a 1-tick pulse, and what that will do is it'll push this block out so that we activate this signal tower here. The next part is the redstone circuitry here that's going to activate the dispenser when it has an item in it. The way this works is the comparator will read if the dispenser has an item in it. If it does, it's going to power this block, which will then power that block here, and that will activate the dispenser. In case we've thrown in multiple items, what will happen is that this series of redstone will be powered here, and that will actually deactivate this repeater for a tick before this reactivates again, and it's just going to keep ticking until the dispenser is empty. So if we test that out by putting some stone into it, you can see it's just going to chuck that all out. And if we had a water source block here, that would all flow along and feed into the appropriate item filters. So any items that are not picked up by one of the item filters are going to end up going to the very back here, and they're going to flow into this chain here, which is going to take them all the way through into this dropper tower. This dropper tower is going to feed them all the way up into this barrel so that you can take out again in case you put in a valuable item, like for example one of your pickaxes or some diamonds or something like that that you don't want to lose. The way this works is that the comparator will read out the contents of this dropper here, and that will extend this piston, creating an observer clock, which will then activate every second dropper, which will feed all of the items up into this barrel. This won't ever break even if we end up with more than one item in the dropper, as we're simply going to keep pulsing this observer clock. So if we take a door and put it in here, you can see it ends up in the top here. The next component we want to build up is our reset circuitry. That's this over here in yellow. So our input's going to be here. And what this does is we have a sticky piston here, so this is just going to generate a 1-tick pulse, which is going to activate a 2-tick repeater here, making a 2-tick pulse. So if we send a signal through here, it's going to extend those pistons. So if we have a block that is extended, it's going to pull that block back again. In order to create a little bit of delay before this happens, we've got a pulse extender here. It's quite simple, it's just two comparators facing this way into a block with a redstone torch on it, and then some redstone dust on either side and two comparators facing the other way. So you can see that in action here. It powers up, deactivating the redstone torch, and then if we remove the signal, it's going to slowly depower and then activate that redstone torch again, which is going to send a signal through our reset circuitry. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, we have two options for how to reset this. Option number one is to read when the item leaves this barrel here and reset it then, and that's what this circuitry does here. So we have a block and then a comparator which reads the signal strength from this barrel here, and that's going to power this block here, and this repeater is then going to power this block here, sending a signal to this redstone dust here. So if we put an item into the barrel, you see it powers up this redstone circuitry here, and then if we remove it after a delay, it's going to depower and this redstone torch is going to activate, resetting the whole system. The other option we have for our reset mechanism is, if we don't want to read it from the barrel, we can just have a delay whenever a floor is selected, and after that delay created by this delay circuit here, we're just going to reset the system. So essentially every time a floor is selected, this line is going to be powered, which is going to depower this torch here, allowing this pulse extender to depower after a period of time, and that will trigger the reset circuitry. So if we extend this redstone block here, you see that this will gradually depower and our torch will switch on, and that block will be pulled back. Finally, we have a switch to switch between these two different methods of resetting. That's shown in blue here. Don't actually need this block. So if we flick this switch, it'll activate this method here, reading it from the barrel, and if we flick it back again, it's going to retract this block, so we're no longer going to be able to read input from the barrel, and this method here is going to trigger the depowering of this delay circuit. So that is the whole contraption built up. Now all that's left for you to do is to build up the signal tower coming from the output here and connect that up to your elevator design if that's what you're doing. I won't cover that in this video because I've already covered it in the previous video. I'll leave a link in the description. That is all for this week's episode. Thank you guys for watching. It was a little bit more complicated than last week's episode, so hopefully you all were able to follow it. As always, any feedback in the comments section would be greatly appreciated, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks, bye bye.